Jennifer Lewis will be introducing the next panel. She's a chief software designer engineer for SAIC. She has developed interoperability solutions for distributed training and analytic live, virtual, and constructive simulation environments for the US Army and US Air Force for the past 18 years. She holds a Master's of Science in Computer Science and an emphasis in telecommunications and networking from the University of Texas at Dallas, and is a certified modeling and simulation professional. Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Thurkettle, for your introduction. I'm honored to introduce our moderator for the next session, Mr. Nunzio Quacquarelli. Nunzio is the founder and CEO of QS, the world's largest higher education network and a global education services and analytics provider. As CEO, Nunzio drives QS's founding mission to help young people to fulfill their potential through educational achievement, international mobility, and career development. Please welcome Mr. Quacquarelli.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, and I'd just like to thank General Kelly and the committee for a very well organized conference so far. And I would like to introduce my fellow moderator, Professor Jerry Wind, who is the Emeritus Professor of Marketing at the Wharton School, one of the most cited professors in marketing in the world today, and my co-founder of the Reimagine Education Awards and Conference. If we go to the next slide, please. So we're here to talk about working out what works, a practical innovation panel. And as General Lejeune just said, never waste a good crisis. And Jerry Wind has been saying that to me for the last 6 months as well. So great minds think alike. I would like to, this is an inflection point for higher education. This is a really important topic. And we're drawing lessons from the Wharton QS Reimagine Education Awards, which I'll tell you about in a second. But first of all, I'd like to introduce our fantastic panelists. We've really brought together world experts who are leaders in higher education and distributed learning. So I'd like to introduce Anant Agarwal, who is the founder and CEO of edX, one of the world's leading online learning platforms, and also a professor of electrical engineering and computer science at MIT. I'd like to introduce Leila Guerra, who is the Ph.D. in education at Imperial College Business School, responsible for outstanding student experiences, both presential and online, working with the Imperial EdTech Lab. Sarah Toms, who is the co-founder and executive director of the Wharton Interactive. She describes herself as a serious gaming expert and a thought leader in simulated learning. And then finally, Santiago Iñiguez, who is the president of IE University. He's a thought leader in business education I much admire, and is the author of The Learning Curve, How Business Schools Are Reinventing Education. So they all have a huge amount to offer on this topic, and I only apologize in advance that we only have 45 minutes. And so it is going to be a fast and furious topic, which we will also end with a poll. There's a Slido poll. If you go to slido.com and enter poll code 79731, you can then, during this discussion, vote for the 3 innovations that you believe will have the greatest impact on learning and career outcomes for young people. And we'll be very interested to see your views. So first of all, if we go to the next slide. Next, please. First of all, I'm just going to provide a quick overview of some 10 areas of innovation from the Reimagine Education Awards, and highlight some examples, case studies, and then we'll move to the panel. Just a background on Reimagine. Jerry and I founded it in 2014. It's been a wonderful experience. 6,000 innovators from around the world have contributed their thought-leading ideas on the future of higher education, and we've done a deep dive into 2,800 applications from 2018-2019, which have been evaluated by 260 judges, all experts from around the world, to evaluate their contributions, which are all geared towards innovation in learning, teaching, and nurturing employability. So real insight for this topic of working out what works. If we go to the next slide, please. Next, yeah. And just to give you some scope, there have been contributions from 91 countries. The USA has been the most prolific contributor with 204 submissions. The UK second with 72. Mexico third with 68, followed by India, Hong Kong, Australia, and Nigeria. We've had a lot of submissions from Africa who are very active in the distributed learning field. Next, please. So this is the heart of the discussion. Our cluster analysis of reimagined education applications have identified these 10 areas of successful innovation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask our panelists to talk about each area. So improved e-learning for lifelong education is going to be discussed by Santiago. Transformation of current pedagogical approaches, including blended learning and scheduled, will be discussed by Sarah. Experiential learning, gamification, and playful learning will be discussed by Leila. Data-informed personalization by Santiago. AI-enabled education in a world where every student has access to AI tools on their smartphone by Jerry. Curricular innovation based on neuroscience and learning science, also by Jerry. And then focus on values and employability skills by Anant. Peer-to-peer and AI innovations for assessment at scale by Sarah. Broadening access by unbundling degrees and diversifying business models by Anant. And then finally, new knowledge networks founded on open innovation, talent, and employment needs by Leila. Next. And we want to understand which innovations really work, which are going to have the greatest impact, but also, is there anything we're missing? Next. And I'm just going to give you some winning entries from 5 of these categories because we don't have time to go through all of them. Next. And the first category is broadening access by unbundling degrees. And this is based on a new award that we launched in 2019 in collaboration with ADL, which is Best Distributed Learning Program for Nurturing 21st Century Skills. And the winner of that inaugural award was Georgia Tech Online Master in Computer Science, which was scaled to 9,000 students at an incredibly affordable cost of $7,500 per student. And runner-up was the MITx MicroMaster in Supply Chain Management, which is a different model. It's a pathway with online learning as the precursor to presence learning for a full MIT degree. And as I said, Anant will tell us more about that. Next. And AI is clearly going to have a greater impact. Admiral Rob was discussing that. Duolingo was a winner of our e-learning award in 2016, a great example. Over 300 million students have learned languages through Duolingo, and it uses millions of data points in machine learning to identify bite-sized learning sequences that provide the best learning outcomes for students. Next. And there are many forms of data-informed personalization. I know that ADL is heavily involved in this field. A really interesting case study is IE's Wow Room, which uses facial recognition technology to measure class engagement and data analytics to record class participation, removing the need for the lecture hall and highly engaging at the same time for the participants. Next. And experiential learning, gamification, playful learning, also very present within the Department of Defense in the US. An example like Labster, which provides scientific laboratories in virtual reality at a fraction of the cost for the student learner, or Imperial College Business School's holographic lectures, which was also discussed by General Lejeune, where the lecturer can beam into a class anywhere in the world, and they can actually have a two-way interaction through two-way video and audio connectivity. So a really fun change and also cost-effective and environmentally friendly. Next. And the final example is in a transforming pedagogical approaches through blended learning, and this is very prescient. This entrance was a winner of hybrid learning in 2019 before we'd even heard of COVID, and it was a Broad Institute of Harvard Operation Outbreak, which was to gamified platform for infectious disease education, where it combined learning in sciences and humanities with real-world pandemic outbreak managed through students' mobile phone technology. Incredibly prescient. Next. So we're now actually going to go to the panel discussion, and then we will have the vote. And for the panel discussion, I am going to first of all just ask each of the panelists to spend a couple of minutes just talking about the innovative lessons they've had from their organizations in terms of what works, or identifying something that's missing from the list that we've provided. I'm going to turn off my camera at this point, and I'm going to ask Leila to go first. It's just 2 minutes each because of the time constraints.
Thank you so much, Nunzio. I hope you can all hear me. I can see Anant. but hope this will work. Yes, there we go. So thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today. I hope to find you all well. I'm going to spend just a few minutes to introduce the innovations we have identified at Imperial College Business School. And it's quite timely. Only a few days ago, I was asked about the lessons learned in the last 5 months, as we have all been experiencing and suffering through this global pandemic. And I came to the conclusions that the innovations we had introduced at Imperial College were actually already happening, and this pandemic had accelerated it. And it reflects nicely, of course, in the fact that I do believe it is within all of our responsibilities to be at the forefront and respond to the deep need of personal and professional transformation of our communities. Now, Imperial College is at the intersection of science, technology, and business. So all of these topics that Nunzio just mentioned are well into our areas. We combine neuroscience, machine learning, and AI, to name just a few. When I was reflecting what were the 3 deep innovations that I wanted to share with the community today, I wanted to highlight the following. The first one is the personalized learning and implementing tools that facilitate reflections and tailor your needs. As we are particularly now working with a generation of DYU learners, learners that have learned themselves and that are challenging us to transform our model, to transform the way we learn, we offer them an academic experience. It is very important to move away from a mass education and to a deep dive into personalized learning. We combine that with the use of machine learning and smart data to predict student performance and measure our impact and the importance of the tools we offer them. And that use of machine learning to predict student performance has allowed us to tailor the needs to each and every single student and takes away any potential barrier. This is particularly important also when you think and reflect on what platforms you're using. In the case of Imperial College Business School, we came to the conclusion that most of the technological platforms were hindering us, or they were limiting us instead of allowing us for that personalization that I just addressed. And so we decided to move ahead and sorry, I've given you a alarm to make sure I'm in time. The final reflection is the experiential learning to remove all kind of barriers that I just referred to. Geographical barriers, in our case with the use of hologram, diversity barriers as we introduce teaching on unconscious bias, responsible business, and that's what technology has allowed us. It's all with one aim, summarized into one major umbrella: increasing your self-awareness and your self-concept.
Super. Thank you very much, Leila. And next I'll ask Anant.
Thank you very much, Nunzio. It's my pleasure to chat with you all today. First, a very quick introduction. I'm part of edX. edX is a nonprofit founded by Harvard and MIT. It's a learning platform. It connects learners from all over the world to content and education from some of the top institutions in the world, like Harvard, MIT, Imperial College, Oxford, Cambridge, and others, where these institutions create content, and we have 33 million learners on edX that are learning from these institutions. It's completely online. One of the challenges we face in the world today is that learning and education is expensive. It's very expensive. People don't have access to it. It takes too much time. Typically, you want to have to sign up for a degree, and the degree might take you a minimum of 1 year. Undergraduate degrees go on for 4 to 6 years. So that's a real challenge. Similarly, it's not flexible. You have to, so let's say, for example, for lifelong learning, you're working, you need to upskill. Going to a university to get a master's is just way too hard. And the application process is hard. You have to go and live on campus, possibly away from your family for 1 year to 2 years. But all of these things make it near impossible for people to keep learning and acquiring 21st century skills. So one solution is to foster this culture of lifelong learning and to think about reimagining education. And one of the innovations that edX created, along with our university and corporate partners, is to unbundle the degree. So rather than think of a one-year master's, imagine if you could unbundle the degree like Lego blocks into components. One example of that is the MicroMasters. That was one of the winners in the 21st Century Skills category last year at the Reimagine Education Award. So rather than spend a whole year in a degree, a MicroMasters is a piece. It's about 25% of a master's degree. There's no applications process. It's open admissions. You can start learning for free. If you want the credential, you have to pay on the order of $1,000 to $1,500. And if you pass, you get a credential called a MicroMasters from a place like MIT or University of Pennsylvania or Columbia. Columbia has a MicroMasters in AI on edX. And so today we have about 63 such MicroMasters in edX, and they stack up. You complete a MicroMasters and you can use that to make your applications process into a master's degree stronger. And then should you want to go for a master's, you can go complete a master's. And so these modular programs that are stackable enables you to unbundle the degree and dramatically increase access to education. Today, we've had at edX over 8 million enrollments in our 63 MicroMasters programs on topics like IoT and AI and computer science and manufacturing and so on. And when we did surveys of learners the nearly 10,000 learners who actually earned certificates, the MicroMasters credentials, 89% of them are telling us that they already have had a positive career outcome, a pay raise, a new job, or a promotion as a result of these new credentials that have really broken the shackles of expense, broken the shackles of time, and also flexibility, enable them to upskill and acquire 21st century skills and credentials. Thank you.
We'll come back to that later on. Thank you very much for that overview. And next, I'd like to ask Sarah to take the floor.
Hello, it's lovely to be here. Thank you so much, Nunzio and Jerry. The golden rule of giving a talk is your landscape team will arrive as soon as the talk is about to begin, so apologies for any background noise. Here at the Wharton School, we take a lot of pride in obviously thinking about how we move the student, being more student-centered with respect to the education that we're delivering. And right after going into lockdown, we all met to really think about how we could innovate within this space and look at the threats and opportunities to education, especially given that we wouldn't be able to provide the social context for learning and being in your face-to-face communities. And what some incredible faculty came up with was realizing that we talk the talk about being multidisciplinary, but we don't necessarily walk the walk all the time. And so this gave us an incredible opportunity to actually create a 6-week course that met synchronously and was across all disciplines of our undergraduate education. So we had almost 2,500 students meeting for those 6-week time frame. We had 17 lecturers from across the school. And the title of the class was called Epidemics, Natural Disasters, and Geopolitics, Managing Global Business and Financial Uncertainty. And it was really well attended. And what we were able to create was this incredible learning community coming out of an experience like that. The other thing that we've been able to really, and again, to Leila's point earlier, we discovered that a lot of the innovation that we needed, given having to reinvent what higher education looks like, was already happening. It was just not necessarily being tapped into to the degree that it is now. And here at the Wharton School, we are not just servicing learners in undergraduate and graduate degrees and PhDs, we're also hitting lifelong learners, executives, and also even high school students. And so early on in the pandemic, we started to work with our partners in the lifelong learning and also in our high school organizations, and we started to offer global simulation events. So this is hundreds and hundreds of learners. We were connecting them, working in teams, and going through incredible simulations that my team have created on our gaming platform. One in particular is called the Saturn Parable. So having teams maneuver a competitive flight to a remote moon just outside of Saturn, and really thinking about leadership principles, teamwork, communicating in a crisis, and also competitive strategy. So very, very successful on all of these fronts. In addition, we've been—
Can I cut you off and you could then pick that up when we come back?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Sarah. And could I ask Santiago to take the floor?
Thanks very much, Nunzio, and congratulations to NTSA for this very excellent event. Current exceptional circumstances have been an opportunity for all of us to realize about the positive impact of technology in education, how the learning process can become much more personalized thanks to innovation and new apps. During this time, based on our experience at IE University, we have developed a new vision for education that we call liquid learning. Liquid learning is based on a simple but very powerful assumption. There are no limits for learning. You may learn anywhere, anytime, interacting with others on a self-paced way, in teams or in class. The basic proposal of liquid learning is to assume this fluidity of the learning process and maximize its potential using all the advantages provided by technology. Liquid learning has been very appealing and has extremely attractive attributes. It's flexible, adaptable, intensive, user-friendly, even entertaining. It also combines online learning, synchronous and asynchronous formats, fora or self-paced lessons, along with a classroom-based approach. The advantage of liquid learning is that it can keep the learning momentum going and better adapting to the circumstances of the learner. It also allows for greater interactivity with other participants. IE University and IE Business School have been leading hybrid programs now for about 20 years, combining these face-to-face classroom sessions with high-quality online forms of delivery, both synchronous and asynchronous. For example, the 2020 QS ranking positioned our global MBA as #1 worldwide, or The Economist just ranked our executive MBA with Brown University as #3 worldwide as well. Let me just finish by mentioning what are some of the advantages of this liquid learning philosophy. And the main, vector behind this is actually the faculty. It has been, the major reason for success over the years at our university. As I always say, maybe contents can be princess, the platform may be queen, but in the end, the experience is empress, and the experience is actually led by our faculty. Thanks very much, and back to the moderator.
Thank you very much, Santiago, for that great insights from everyone. And what I'd like to do now is ask each panelist and Jerry to go through the 10 innovation areas, 2 of them each. I'd also like to suggest that our audience do go to Slido, enter in the code 79731, and you can start to vote for the innovations that you think will have the greatest impact on learning and career outcomes in the future. So again, we're time constrained. I'm going to ask if our panelists can keep to 3 minutes each for this summary, which I apologize for the short amount of time. And we may have some time at the end for you to then challenge people's assertions to say, what could hold us back? What could go wrong? But if we start with Anant, could you talk about broadening access by unbundling degrees and the focus on employability skills for 21st century? Thank you, Anant.
Sure, thank you, Nunzio. As I was mentioning earlier, there are 3 major challenges to people looking to upskill, acquire 21st century skills, advance in their careers. Just imagine if you are a 30-year-old, you have a family, and today your options are apply to college to earn a 4-year bachelor's or a 2-year master's degree. The applications process is hard enough. Then you have to go in to the campus for 1 or 2 years, and then you have to shell out for a computer science degree, for example, a master's degree, on the order of $45,000, $50,000 for a data science degree and equivalent amount. So it's very, very hard. It's too expensive, it takes too long, and it's too inflexible. So instead, one approach to solving this problem is to really reimagine education and rethink all of these boundaries. And technology enables us to do that. So first of all, why 2 years? I mean, whoever said that a degree needs to be 4 years or 2 years? Renee, if I could have, if you could pop up the slide for me about the microbachelors, just as background, I think that would be helpful. Thank you. So instead, imagine if we could unbundle a degree into components, just like you can build a big picture, a big degree with Lego blocks. So for example,
I think
one
we
of
might
the
have frozen.
Pardon?
No, carry on, Anant, please.
Okay. So one of the solutions here is to unbundle the degree into the components. So here's an example of a new program we've created at edX called microbachelors. So rather than have a 4-year degree, we create microbachelors programs. Each microbachelors is on the order of 3 courses. So you see a microbachelors certificate in IT foundations. And a typical microbachelors might be 3 to 9 credits as they're awarded in the US, for instance. You can have 3 courses as part of it. And so that's a microbachelor. So you complete that and you get a microbachelors. So on edX, for example, you can get a microbachelors in computer science from NYU, or you can get a microbachelors in IT foundations from Western Governors University. And this will take you on the order of 3 to 6 months to complete. It's very inexpensive. It's $167 per credit hour compared to $2,000 a credit hour or to $4,000 a credit hour at a typical university. It's open admissions at the same time, and it's flexible in that you can do it at your own pace, you can do it completely online. So a modular program like a microbachelors solves the problem of expense, solves the problem of flexibility, and also solves the problem of a degree taking too long. Then what you can do is you have 2 options. One, you can decide, you know what, I want to get a full bachelor's degree. So you can take these modular microbachelors blocks and you can stack them up like Legos, and then you can synthesize a complete Bachelor of Computer Science or IT management kind of degree. And each microbachelors can also come from different institutions. They don't have to come from the same institution. And each time you complete a microbachelors, you get college credit on a transcript. Our partner here is Thomas Edison State University, and you keep accumulating credit as you go along, just like you have a bank account where you can keep depositing money. Now, for those who want to pursue a degree, you can stack up the micro-credentials to a degree. On the other hand, there might be others that say, you know what, 1 or 2 microbachelors is enough, I need to get a job. So you can use your microbachelor's credential, post it on your LinkedIn profile or in your resume, and you can use that to get a job. And you can be working, and there's really no reason to go for a degree or get a job or one or the other. You can seamlessly move back and forth. So this is an example of how.
Can I call you to a halt there? Thank you very much for that introduction. I actually lost my connection for a minute then, so apologies, but I'm back on. If we could ask Jerry to now provide an overview of AI-enabled education in the world where every student has access to a smartphone and curricular innovation based on neuroscience. Jerry. Jerry, you're mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks, Nunzio. Before adding my comments on AI and neuroscience and how they're going to change the current educational paradigm, I would like really to take a minute to emphasize the context of the changes AI and neuroscience are likely to bring. And think about this as a Venn diagram of 3 circles. The first one is really society's challenges, including the educational divide that in turn is associated with the other critical divides of digital, economic, social, and even health and happiness. The second circle in our Venn diagram, think about this as the fundamental values, the values of truth, importance of science, democratic values, compassion, ethics, do no harm, win-win for all. And the third area is what we have been focusing so far, which is primarily the needed innovations in education. That includes, among the 10 innovation area we identified, the 2 that I was asked to talk about. So when you think about AI, Think of the Sloan Kettering use of Watson IBM AI system to help their physicians in diagnosing cancer and once identified in the treating of cancer. This is used primarily to augment the physician skills and can be done by actually leveraging all the knowledge in the world about cancer, all the studies in any language in any medium. Compare this to a situation where you don't have the AI-enabled work, when a physician relies on the few articles that they read a year. Now imagine that this in the educational context, that every learner will have a Watson app on their smartphone for any topic they're studying. And all of this is with validated knowledge. It's not like Google search that you have no idea how valid the information is. Here we're talking about validated knowledge. How would you design your curriculum and lessons plans when you're addressing students who have access to Watson and other AI systems as their personal assistant with validated knowledge and topics to address? Now, to avoid the risk of biased AI systems, which there's a lot of concern today about, the design of these AI systems should be governed by our fundamental values. Remember the second circle we talked about, and aimed ideally to help address society's challenges. When you think about neuroscience, think of how much more effective our educational efforts could be if we understood how each learner is learning, and we could customize our educational approaches to their individual learning styles and natural abilities. The incorporation of our understanding from neuroscience and related fields like genetics and others should be governed the same as we talked about AI by the fundamental values, and ideally help us identify and help address society's challenges. Whatever action you decide to take as a result of our panel discussion, whether the two areas I mentioned or any of the others mentioned by our panelists, make sure to place your innovative initiative that you're selecting and experiment in the context of the other critical circles of our Venn diagram.
Thank you, Jerry. And there's a great example of neuroscience being implied with Lifter to provide immersive video learning for autistic children that showed great improvement in the learning outcomes of autistic children, just to prove that it really works. If we could now move to Leila, and Leila, if you could talk about experiential learning, gamification, and playful learning, and new knowledge network founded on open innovation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nunzio. This does feel like a sprint. I'll try to be brief. Hear me out. You read playful learning, and anyone who is an academic or who's done research kind of has a reaction of, oh, wait, what's playful? So I want to present it in that way. When was the last time a learning really, really stayed with you, with any of us? When was the last time that something just got integrated into our DNA and we knew for sure we would not forget it? And I want to go back to this generational change that we have experienced, that we're actually living. Gen Z is already doing something that we all did in our generations, which is moving slightly away from an approach of books and one faculty preaching and teaching students to a situation where we all learn from each other. And we tell this all the time to our MBA students, you have to learn from each other. And the reality is that it is experiential learning. It is learning by doing, the one that gets integrated in your brain, and neuroscience demonstrates that as well. We do know that technology has allowed us to reach many more audiences, many more candidates out there in the world where we were just failing them in reaching and allowing them to learn to the best, to their maximum capacity. And we also know that gamification and playful or creative learning, as I'd rather call it, allows us to expose stimulations, to recreate situations that reduces your stress levels, prepares you better for leaderships. We were hearing before what Wharton is doing. We're doing other things. All of these schools that are here today are working with experiential learning. Experiential learning at Imperial College is at the heart of what we do. That doesn't undermine anything else. It does not reduce the importance of the expert. On the contrary, you need the academic expert to lead on this. However, I do believe that experiential learning, gamification, exponentially grows and maximizes our impact. And at the end of the day, when it comes to reaching democratizing education, making sure that every single person in the world has the maximum opportunities of academic progress, which also includes personal and professional progress, experiential learning, gamification is still unexplored. Many more things will come that way, and that's one thing I wanted to mention. When it comes to knowledge networks, we were talking about competition. We are in a global competition scenario at the moment, and I like to think, at least at Imperial, that we're working towards co-opetition, collaboration, even when we're competing. We're at the business school founded an alliance, the Future of Education Management, and we work with other schools to learn from each other, to create networks that are founded on knowledge. I do believe that open innovation is the best way for us to learn, even within business schools. In many of our sectors, from students to faculty, it has been a way of democratizing, sorry for my English, the way we can address and we can reach. And we hear this from recruiters. Recruiters are telling us that the employment that they need is based on knowledge, it's based on learning, it's no longer based on age, it's no longer necessarily based on hierarchies as well. So you can see that these ecosystems of knowledge that are being created all around the world, we are part of many of them. I know many of you are in your areas, in your industries, is the right way of progressing. Doesn't mean we're not competing, but we're doing it in a way where we're learning from each other and we're collaborating.
Super. Thank you, Leila. You did very well. And I'd like to invite Santiago to take the floor now to talk about improved e-learning for lifetime education and data-informed personalization.
Thanks very much, Nunzio. Let me start with improved e-learning for lifetime education. And what is clear to all of us is that the future post-pandemic world enhances adaptation and change. Professionals will live blended lives, and the work environment will become increasingly hybrid and liquid too. In this new world, professionals will work in teams, both in presence or on social platforms, from home or at their company offices, in a continuum that blurs distance, time, and that increases productivity. They will increasingly deal virtually with colleagues from different hemispheres and time zones, making friends who belong to diverse cultures and possess different visions of the world. This is already a common standard for sure at some professions and industries like the military. In fact, given demographics and the extension of retirement age, lifelong learning will become the fastest growing segment of education in the future, and thus an opportunity for all universities. Following my thoughts shared before, executive education and lifelong learning should become liquid too, accommodating all these changes in society. This liquidity will be also reflected on the creation and distribution of knowledge, teaching methodologies, and communication in general, but mostly in embedding the whole executive learning into the company's environment and mission. In fact, liquid learning adapts better to the availability of objectives of the executive at their companies. In our experience, it even cements a much more solid corporate culture among participants and strengthens networking among co-workers. Having said this, for a long time, CLOs, we all know this, have been very reluctant to hire online providers for their top executive courses. This was mainly because very few leading executive centers and business schools were able to deliver high quality hybrid programs in a customized way for companies. However, the pandemic has forced many of our peer business schools to catch up very quickly, and we are now attending a race to jump successfully into hybrid formats, blended programs, and liquid learning at large. 5 years ago, iBusiness School with the Financial Times Group created a company in response to these challenges of executive education, a joint venture whose mission is to combine academic muscle and direct knowledge of companies with a vocation for integrating technology and teaching. Its reach is global, and it is open to collaboration with universities around the world. I believe that similar platforms will for sure appear in the coming years. Allow me maybe very briefly, since I realize that my slot is almost finished, but let me just make a very quick reference to how data-informed personalization can revolutionize education in the future. And my point is actually that technology can actually help to personalize and humanize education, contrary to what many people believe about this inhuman impact of technologies in the learning process. That is, technology with the right orchestration of faculty can potentiate the best talents of each individual. We're actually noticing this in the application of our most recent tools, the Wow Room, which is a virtual auditorium launched 4 years ago, and the Wow Room in a Box, which is actually the application of that same tool through a learning platform and its use in all our classrooms. What I can guarantee is that this is the future of learning, particularly in these circumstances of uncertainty and potential lockdown. And the key thing again is the faculty. We need to train our faculty to cope with all these challenges of technology. Thanks very much, and back to Nunzio.
Thank you very much, Santiago. And our final contributor in this debate is Sarah Thomas, who's going to talk about transforming pedagogical approaches through simulation and blended learning and peer-to-peer and AI innovations for assessment at scale. Thank you, Sarah.
Awesome, thank you, Nunzio. So where we are in the simulation space, in particular for business simulations, is we're just continuing to face, we're riddled with different limitations. One is simulations are incredibly expensive to develop. Generally speaking, at the end of the day, what gets developed is not the way real decision making happens in the real world. They tend to be very woody, they tend to be very artificial, and they're not really as immersive as they claim they are. And so that's really where my team, our genesis comes from, is thinking about how we reimagine, in particular, business simulations, but in developing a gaming platform for education, we've realized very quickly in conversations with our graduate education colleagues and also the medical school at Penn that we've developed something that will work really well across disciplines. So our team about 2.5 years ago began developing something called alternate reality courseware. It is a gaming platform that does hyper-realistic experiences where our learners are going through not just a one-class simulation, but we have a simulation that unfolds over the course of days, weeks, even months. And what we're thinking about here is, how do we really bring to life not just 1 or 2 learning objectives, but how do we bring to life many, many dozen all together? And the reason for doing this is when you think about the design of a class, you have this natural atrophying effect that happens over the course of a semester, even a small, punchy, quick 6-week class. What happens in the first course maybe starts to feel more and more disconnected as you get to the last class in that course offering. And so what you can do in a simulation environment like the one we've created on ARC is you can start to bring and weave all of those learning objectives together, where your learners can really see the trade-offs between, what's happening in business finance and teamwork and leadership and strategic decision-making, competitive analysis, etc., and how that all really needs to come together. And not just that, we're able to have non-player characters come to life. So you're also dealing with personalities. You're dealing with what it takes for your social emotional intelligence as you're going through this experience. And then on the feedback side, we're able to also custom tailor the feedback to the individual learners. So we're no longer looking at a one-size-fits-all approach to learning. This is also putting the learners in the driver's seat of their educational experience. So starting to think about how we leverage not the old, the old forms of gaming and simulation where you're entering numbers into an artificial interface, you're hitting go, and you're ticking over to the next period, and huzzah, you've done great, or oh dear, you entered the wrong number. Let's think about how we bring more realism into gaming and simulations. The second thing then with this is access. So what my team is doing right now is we're actually outward looking. We're thinking about how we provide this best-in-class approaches to simulations and experiences beyond a Wharton education, how we think about training leaders in medical situations, how we think about training folks in the armed forces, NASA, etc. We're really looking at how these games can apply to other contexts. On the peer-to-peer side, our team has also been working on a closed social community for learners and classes. So what we know about the learning science, number one, approximately 20% of your learners at any given time will be verbal in a class, which means your classes are not as democratic as they should be. But we've been studying our learners when they come into our simulations and into our peer-to-peer learning environments, and we're able to get 100% engagement. And that really is the key here. When we're talking about what democratizing education means, it means getting that share of everybody should have a voice in that learning experience. The other thing we know about even older fashioned discussion boards, online discussion boards, is we do gain a higher level of thinking because everybody is forced to pause and think before they enter. And so being in these hyper interactive and very engaging social learning environments, it's really going to, and again, Leila, just to call out what she said earlier, we need to learn from those who are younger than us and how they want to learn, and start to integrate that into how we're teaching. So those would be two examples that I wanted to share, Nunzio. And from the AI innovation space, just again thinking about not being so monolithic about our learners. How can we start to get a lot more tailored, a lot more specific, but also recognizing that a lot of those AI algorithms, there's trade-offs when we choose them. And there's also some other ethical issues where we start to have diversity and inclusion issues starting to surface within those algorithms.
I would love to have time to ask questions about values and socialization that Jerry touched upon with Venn diagram. We are actually out of time. I am going to ask the host if they could just pull up the Slido vote so we could just see where we are with that. Could you make that larger? So great. So at the moment, improved e-learning for lifelong education is ahead. Data-informed personalization, and then transforming pedagogical space through blended learning spaces is running second. And this is a live vote. So given that we're out of time, I apologize we don't have time for any Q&A, but we're going to ask if the final results can be shared on the iFEST website on the Working Out What Works page, and we'll also email these results to everyone so that we have all the results. So we do encourage you to carry on voting so we have a complete set of responses. That would be extremely helpful. And on that note, I'd just like to thank my fellow moderator, Professor Jerry Wind, and our fantastic panelists, Anant Agarwal of edX, Leila Guerra of Imperial College Business School, Sarah Toms of Wharton Interactive, and Santiago Iñiguez of IE Business School. And you know, from me, Nunzio Quacquarelli, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your conference. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Nunzio, and all of our panelists. That was a great discussion. As Nunzio mentioned, we don't have time for questions, but please do visit the Working Out What Works panel page on the conference website, where you can still continue this discussion online. We will post a recording of today's session and answers to your questions there on the conference website. We will now go to a 12-minute break, and we'll meet back here at 1 o'clock sharp. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.